strong.
Chapter 231, Blind Date. After Qian Shan Mu arrived, he walked to the place where Dong Hazong's people were, stood still in the crowd, and looked at the peerless beauty in the pavilion. At this time, in the pavilion, Qin Mengruo is graceful, she has long fingers, she touches the piano with both hands, and the strings move. The melody is melodious and soft. Qin Yan's artistic mood is extraordinary, like colorful rays of light falling on Qin Mengruo's body, which makes her a little more divine and noble temperament. When he plays Guqin, he has a beautiful color on his body, like sunshine, wind, bright and beautiful. This is very simple music, the notes depict a beautiful and peaceful picture. Qin Yan also looks like her temperament, noble and elegant, calm and beautiful. Qin Yan, it seems nothing special. Simple, but fun. At this time, in the direction of Dong Hazong, I saw a touch of emerald green in Qian Shenmu's hand, a bamboo flute. Qian Shenmu placed the bamboo flute at the corner of his lips, and then slowly started to play. The flute is heard with the sound of the piano, but does not steal the atmosphere of the piano sound, but is born to help the piano sound. The breeze, the leaves swaying, and other moods appear, as if depicting the beauty of nature, in an imaginary picture. There is not only sunshine and wind, but it is faintly like seeing flying butterflies and running deer. Qin Meng suddenly changed, no longer lonely and beautiful, Qin Meng became sharp and sharp. At this moment, Qin Mengruo is like a noble princess, a princess who wields a sword, who can conquer the battlefield, lead thousands of troops, and become a female general on the battlefield. Do not defame. The sound of the flute also changes, becoming sharp, but without losing its elegance. He was like a knight on the battlefield, and he was indestructible. The style of piano and flute sounds is constantly changing, and the artistic conceptions expressed are constantly blurred. Previously, everyone could clearly feel the artistic conception expressed by the rhythm, but then, it was difficult to present the image in the mind. Naturally, they would not doubt Qin Mengruo and Qian Shenmu's achievements in melody, perhaps the achievements were too high for them to feel the mood. Ye Fuxian always listened quietly, as if admiring. It's nice to hear the coordination of these two melodies, but a little inadequate. Finally, the sound of the piano and flute stopped slowly, and the room still seemed silent. Nothing was heard, as if drowning in the previous mood. Everyone looked at Qin Mengruo, and one couldn't help but admire, Princess Song, it's intoxicating. A variety of moods are contained in one song, which can be easily changed and flawless. Qian Shenmu is able to incorporate the sound of the flute into the sound of the piano very well. It is worthy to claim that the younger generation in the eastern wasteland is the best in temperament. A monk exclaimed, he came from Qiankyu Temple. This is not flattery, even if Qian Shenmu is one of the most evil younger generation Tianzhou, the people here do not need to flatter, everyone present is from the top forces, there is no need to please Qian Shenmu. But good is good, and it deserves praise. Ye Fuxian also felt very good. The monks of the Qiankyu Temple are right, but it is not difficult to play a good song. What was even more difficult was that he always cooperated with Qin Mengruo's melodic rhythm, and was never apart. It fits perfectly, as if it were one. This is the most difficult thing to do. Even though he's good at piano, he can't work with other people yet, which requires a high level of music. Without the fame under his reputation, Qian Shenmu can be considered the strongest temperament of the younger generation in the eastern wasteland, and his abilities are unquestionable. Qin Mengruo looked up, bowed her head slightly towards the dusk of Qian Shan, with a faint smile in her beautiful eyes, and the spring in the garden seemed to be overshadowed. It's an honor to be able to play with the princess. Qian Shenmu nodded in reply, his voice gentle, like a gentleman's. Today's story might be a good one, Dong Hazong said with a smile. Everyone's eyes flashed, giving birth to a different kind of emotion. Dong Hazong people said well. Today's top forces witnessed Tianzhou's arrogance. The Qin dynasty's little princess was a peerless beauty. Unrivaled piano sound. Glorious, Kindi ensemble can indeed be a beautiful talk. Let you laugh, if you have any flaws, I hope you will give a hint. Qin Mengruo smiled and looked at you, noble and graceful but not humble. How do you feel? Liu Feyang asked Ye Fuxian. He is not good at rhythm, he can't see why, only knowing that Qian Shenmu and Qin Meng have high achievements in rhythm, to what extent he can't tell. After all, this was just an ordinary melody, and not developed with musical incantations, the release of a spell could be judged by its strength. This is very powerful. Qian Shenmu can always turn on Qin Mengruo's song. It is very difficult. If he reveals himself with a melody, it will be easy for people to replace him with his mood. Ye Fuxian said, strong is strong. Dong Huazong's impression is not very good, but it will not deliberately bring down the other party. Liu Feiyang looked at Ye Fuxian with a smile. This arrogant man will also praise others, but this is also normal. After all, Qian Shenmu was the first person in the younger generation in the Eastern Wasteland. How could such a peerless person not stand out? Qian Shenmu is not only good at the bamboo flute, he is also good at any melody, and he is very good at the art of the piano. Liu Feiyang said softly. Ye Fuxian nodded slightly. The princess's voice is perfect, Qian Shenmu said. As the first person in the rhythm, he naturally had the power to say this. It's a good reputation, Qin Mengruo said with a smile. I heard that Mozong Jiubiu and Kotang's disciple Ye Fuxian are also good at rhythm, and they must be very outstanding. I'm just a loser, Ye Gongzi. Which Jiubiu opened her mouth with a smile. Her eyes were on Ye Fuxian, as if she didn't care about the defeat. Everyone's eyes turned and fell on Ye Fuxian. In the early wilderness, before Xiao Wuji's appearance, Ye Fuxian had a fame that attracted many people, only because he accepted the magic sect wizard Jiubiu as a servant. The reason was that Jiubiu lost to Ye Fuxian on the beat. Later, Ye Fuxianbang became famous in the ancient world. Many people knew about it and naturally knew that Ye Fuxian was good at phonetics. Many people had ignored Ye Fuxian intentionally or unintentionally before, but Qin Mengruo and Jiubiu's words had attracted everyone's attention to him. The eyes of the troops are different. Fu Yun Jianzong is the first peak. Li Doin and Li Daoqing naturally did not look good, especially Li Doin. He was cut off by Ye Fuxian and had to use a left-handed sword. The favorite woman, Liu Shenyu, is now with Ye Fuxian, and you can imagine Li Daoyun's hatred for Ye Fuxian. Qin Mengruomi's eyes fell on Ye Fuxian. Ye Fuxian laughed. I only know a little rhythm, and I'm not good at it. The princess piano sounds great, and where do I need a hint? Ye Gongzi is simple, and the ancient world is very beautiful. As soon as the world finds out, the forces of all parties go to want to accept the son as his disciple, and finally enter the hut. Qin Mengruo said with a smile, there are 7 disciples in the cottage, plus the son is also there are only 8 people, and many people in the ancient circles now say that when they grow up for a few years, they are afraid that they are incomparable. Ye Fuxian's eyes showed a different color. King Bang's son King Li openly humbled himself, but King Mengruo publicly praised him in public. What was the meaning of this? Many people looked at Ye Fuxian. The words were incomparable, but many people had some opinions. How many arrogant figures in the Eastern Wasteland dare to mention Bushwang? Even Qianshan Mu and other figures only dared to mention a unique rhythm. The people of the world say that the hut only accepts incomparable characters. In the midst of the ancient times, Fu Tian showed a strong talent, but I don't know what the strength is. Now that I have the opportunity, I want to ask for advice. At this time, towards the Donghazong crowd, someone slowly spoke, and seemed to want to publicly challenge Ye Fuxian. The rest of the troops put on an interesting display. If King Meng praised Ye Fuxian Shwang, Dong Hazong wanted to challenge him. Did he want to prove himself? To kill. Ye Fuxian's eyes flashed. Brother Five said that the Qin dynasty had joined hands with Dong Hazong. If King Meng played today, he could also see something. This scene is like killing. Qin Mengruo's words lifted her so high. If he is defeated, the myth of the thatched hut will be destroyed. If he is defeated, it will be a matter of course, and it will not have much impact on Dong Hazong. Because he is a straw disciple. Today I came to admire the princess's game. Isn't the battle elegant? Ye Fuxian smiled, too lazy to take care of the other party's challenge. Turns out he refused. Everyone shows a different color. He should have heard Qin Wang and Sun Qin Li's words. Don't you want to prove your strength? Are you avoiding war? Li Daoqing said coldly. Do you have a face to talk to? The rest of his life glanced at Li Daoqing. Looking at the rest of his life, Li Daoqing's complexion was incomparable. The rest of his life that day in the barren and ancient world was cruel to him. The world compares Ye Gongzi to those who are the most evil in the ancient world. Today, the presence of Donghazong Qianshan Mu has revealed his musical achievements. It will not be a bother if the students of the lodge avoid war. King Mengruo's voice was gentle, with a smile on her face, and she seemed very polite. However, falling on Ye Fuxian's ears was a bit aggressive. Is this referring to his refusal to fight and showing nothing? Is he not qualified to be compared to Donghazong Qianshan Mu? Ye Fuxian smiled and said, today the princess is playing the piano. People of all powers have come to appreciate it. It is a beautiful talk, but it is not so beautiful because it is mixed with some other things. What do you mean by this expression of doubt? What did Ye Gongzi say? King Mengruo asked. Princess asked me to point to the previous piano sound. Ye Fusion laughed. If there is a shortage, please advise. King Mengruo laughed. Okay. Ye Fusion nodded, and smiled. You are going on a blind date, please don't drag me along. After saying that, he turned and left. One of the three beauties of the Eastern Wasteland. How about it, this is wrong for him. Chapter 232, You don't understand the rhythm today. King Mengruo plays the piano here, and invites everyone to come and appreciate it. The twilight of Donghazong Qianshan arrived, resounding with the sound of the flute and flute ensemble, listening softly. Before Liu Feiyang asked how he felt, Liu Feiyang was not good at rhythm, but Ye Fusion could feel the atmosphere in it. Qian Shenmu's flute was always changing with King Mengruo's piano voice. The atmosphere was like a woman, a man after all. The next melody became more and more harmonious, just like Kantha and Ming. Therefore, Ye Fusion will feel that although the rhythm is good, there are some flaws in the place. Combined with Luo Fan's words, the five elder brothers, Ye Fusion guessed that today's piano meeting was a meeting between two forces who wanted to get married. The little princess of the Qin dynasty, the arrogant son of Donghazong. One of them is one of the three great beauties of the Eastern Wasteland, the happy rhythm, and the other is the first of the younger generation in the Eastern Wasteland. This is really a perfect match. If the two major powers merged, it would be very meaningful to arrange such a marriage. However, the two are not ordinary characters. Of course, the elders can decide in one sentence, maybe this is a piano meeting. It looks elegant and fresh. In fact, it was not only Ye Fusion who guessed, many influential people had such feelings. Maybe today was just a meeting between the little princess Qin Mengruo and Qian Shenmu, and the rest was just to frustrate. Knowing the melody and flute of the ensemble, as Donghazong said earlier, is probably a good story. In the future, it was only natural that the two brilliant characters would unite. This is also a beautiful thing today. But all of this was interrupted by a word from Ye Fusion. In one word, no mood. Ye Fusion said bluntly, if you go on a blind date, don't get involved with me. Such a beautiful thing, in his mouth, seems to be very vulgar. With one word, everyone's eyes were fixed and speechless. Even Liu Feiyang and Liu Shenyu did not respond, and looked at Ye Fusion, who lifted his leg and left. Which Jiu Biu smiled and looked at Ye Fusion. This guy really doesn't show his face. King Mengruo and Qian Shenmu's eyes also held their gaze, showing a strange look. The two of them felt quite comfortable and had a good relationship with each other today. However, Ye Fusion's words instantly made their feelings pass a little worse. Stop. A cold voice came out, and the speaker was the Donghazong strongman. Ye Fusion's steps stopped, then he slowly turned around, seeing the Donghazong strongman asked, is something wrong? Today, he was pulled by Liu Feiyang to join in the fun. Pondok does not care about foreign affairs. This can be seen from the attitude of the five brothers. It doesn't matter whether the Qin dynasty and Donghazong join forces, the Hut doesn't care, and he naturally doesn't care. The marriage of the two major powers, he doesn't care. Are King Mengruo and Qian Shenmu together? What's wrong with him? However, the other party had to involve him, which was unbearable. Qin dynasty, Donghazong, and Academy, the three most influential powers in the Eastern Wasteland, two of them merged, so they deliberately stepped on the Academy. Although the lodge is not aligned with the Academy, after all, it is the symbol of the Academy. If you can retreat the lodge, it is equivalent to resigning the Academy. So, start with him. Therefore, why did he have to face each other? Even if you are a disciple of Kotang, is it inappropriate to speak like this? The strong Donghazong said indifferently. Ye Fusion wasn't wrong. Today was indeed the meeting between King Mengruo and Qian Shenmu. In a meeting, Ye Fusion crushed the artistic conception in one word, and it is conceivable that the people in Donghazong felt it. This marriage is very important for the two major powers. The great weight of the two major forces is united, and there will naturally be less damage when they work together. Especially for Donghazong, it is more important. After all, Qian Shenmu of Donghazong will marry the princess of the Qin dynasty back to Donghazong. Qian Shenmu and Donghazong's good reputation was not small. Help what's more, since then, Donghazong has two of the three beauties in the Eastern Wasteland. For Donghazong, who wants to be Donghang's first case, naturally such an opportunity is not to be missed. The two of them hoped that Qian Shenmu and Qin Meng would come together. Where things go wrong, please advise. Ye Fusion smiled and said, because he did, he was afraid to speak. My Donghazong princess and disciple, Qianshan Mukan flute, is a very beautiful thing. It seems vulgar in your mouth. Is this the style of the cottage? Donghazong youth said. Ye Fusion glanced at each other coldly. Qing dynasty and Donghazong just want to step on the hut. The academy is not a gate, and the lodge does not participate in external disputes. Even if the Qing dynasty and Donghazong joined forces, why would they want to step on the academy? Want to become the two most powerful forces in the eastern wasteland. If you come down from thatched huts and academies and mention the most powerful force in the eastern wasteland, the world will really only think of the Qing dynasty and Donghazong, plus the combination of these two forces. It will definitely be a response and the world will gather together with proud. It should be known to everyone in the lodge, but you are Donghazong. Since you did, why don't you admit it? The marriage between the Qing dynasty and the Tianzhou descendant of Donghazong is a beautiful talk, but very secretive. Or do you Donghazong think this is embarrassing? Ye Fusion asked back. Donghazong people are stupid. They could never say that the meeting between Qian Shenmu and the princess was embarrassing. Moreover, they couldn't even refute Ye Fusion's words. If today they denied that Qian Shenmu and the princess knew each other with a rhythm, wouldn't they be slapping themselves if they wanted to get married in the future? In short, since Ye Fusion said that, there was no mood, as if everything had become different. The Donghazong people were silent, but they didn't know how to answer. I have heard that the talent of the Kotang disciples is not only talented, but also very accomplished in terms of words. I saw it today, but I studied it. At this time, a voice came out slowly, and the speaker was impressive. This is the peerless twilight of Tianzhou Qianshan in Donghazong. Obviously, Qian Shenmu satirized the curiosity of the cursed disciples, but he seemed to be more elegant, but then he looked a little vulgar. To meet the princess today, I really thought about it. I heard the piano acquaintance, and the rhythm can express a lot. When it is very popular, I can immortalize a song, but I don't want it to be so uncomfortable in your mouth. Qian Shenmu's voice still seemed calm and not angry, and slowly said, I heard that you are good at rhythm, now it seems that you don't understand rhythm at all. His words were ordinary, but he seemed to characterize Ye Fusion in one word. As the first person of the younger generation in the East Wasteland, he openly said that Ye Fusion didn't understand rhythm, so Ye Fusion naturally didn't understand it. Ye Fusion also watched Qian Shenmu quietly. The two forces joined forces and tried to suppress it. Now in Qian Shenmu's mouth, it had become his fault. It seems that today's beauty is due to her genius. Destroyed, and because of this, he was evaluated as not understanding rhythm. As the first person of Qian Shenmu's younger temperament generation, his judgment of Ye Fusion might soon spread in the eastern wasteland. Ye Fusion looked at Qian Shenmu with a slightly displeased expression. If you think what I said is wrong, you can give some advice. Qian Shenmu seemed to see Ye Fusion's unhappiness, and continued to say, above the rhythm, the words were Jinkoyulu. Ye Fusion suddenly laughed. Qian Shenmu is the first person in the Donghang world to practice rhythm. He was the best at it, and the world was at the peak realm, with his terrible talent. The rhythm is not a problem even for people who are new to the heavenly world. How to teach? Totally intimidating. But he's very lush, what can you say? The world will not care about the level of your territory, but only care about the situation when the two face off. You're right. Ye Fusion suddenly smiled and said, I really don't understand the rhythm. This, are you giving up? Donghazong sneered. Qian Shenmu's expression was still calm. He suppressed Ye Fusion with a rhythm. It's not a noble thing, but Ye Fusion's words are aggressive and he has to do something, otherwise, the faces of the Qing dynasty and Donghazong isn't that ugly. Earlier, Donghazong, who wants to challenge me? Just as Donghazong sneered, Ye Fusion said again. This scene dazzled the eyes of many people. Finally, can't help it. I looked at Donghazong's direction, and a young figure stepped forward. Ji Yuming. Everyone saw this person, and many people knew him. Donghazong, a descendant of the extremely talented Tianjia, was reportedly terrible in battle. Ji Yuming, the fifth level of the law realm, he said to Ye Fusion, reporting his name, his age is similar to Ye Fusion, and if he can defeat Ye Fusion, it will no longer be a myth. It seems that Donghazong in the Qing dynasty did intend to suppress the hut and start from Ye Fusion. Ye Fusion, fourth order method realm. I saw Ye Fusion slowly speak, and then he sat alone on the ground, the light shone, and the keen soul appeared. In front of Ye Fusion, an illusory Gukan appeared there, like beating a record. Seeing this scene, everyone showed a strange look. In front of Ji Yuming, Ye Fusion directly chose to sit down and blossom Kan's soul. Obviously, Ye Fusion intended to fight with the help of King Yan's spell. Just now, Qian Shenmu claimed that he didn't understand rhythm, and he admitted that he didn't understand rhythm. Then, he blossomed Khan's soul, and dealt with the Donghazong people with a rhythm, this. For the rest of his life, he glanced coldly at Qian Shenmu and the Donghazong people. Ye Fusion was not interested in shooting, but the Donghazong people repeatedly pushed each other. In this case, he must see the evil Qianshan in Donghazong. The person who does not understand the rhythm in Mu's mouth, but beats the Donghazong people with the rhythm, what is the expression on the other side? Chapter 233, Revolving. The piano sounded, Ye Fusion sat cross-legged and played the piano. As his slender fingers trembled on the strings, the world seemed to be left alone. Keen and Ye Rong, just a moment, Ye Fusion entered the state. Ji Yuming looked indifferent and stepped forward. His body was instantly covered with purple thunder, rough to the extreme. The whole world seems to be showing an extremely strong power, and it has the power to cover the sky in an instant. In this terrible storm, a terrible thunder sword appeared, slowly emerging from the storm, very frightening. The surrounding people looked at Ji Yuming. Although the other party only has a fifth-order realm, Ji Yuming is famous in Donghazong. He was a very strong practitioner, especially in terms of combat effectiveness. Otherwise, Donghazong he would not have chosen him to suppress Ye Fusion either. After all, even if Ye Fusion does not show his combat effectiveness, but with his strong strength in the ancient world, he will never be weak. Donghazong has the potential of the first gate in the eastern wasteland. Among them, magic is imaginably strong. The breath of magic enveloped this garden. Ye Fusion, who was sitting cross-legged, looked very small. There is a law behind it. It was a terrible storm, spitting on the sword. With a fierce roar, Lei Wei seemed to be above the sound of the harp. The spell bloomed, the purple thunder sword fell from the sky, and shot straight at Ye Fusion's body. When this terrifying spell attack came, Ye Fusion slid his fingers with 5 fingers on the strings, smoothly, with the flick of his fingers, there was a thunder, and a terrible storm of piano sounds directly hit the killing spell. Is it the power of thunder that Zhang Wang, but was crushed and exploded at the same time, turning into an aura that floated between heaven and earth. Everyone's eyes flashed. Ye Fusion's piano voice seemed to be greatly suppressed by coercion, but the shot was like a thunderous thunder, and instantly destroyed Ji Yuming's spell attack, which was extremely overbearing. After he hit, he played slowly again, the melodious sound of the piano, the storm of the sound of the piano seeping between the heavens and the earth, spreading towards the heavens and the earth around him a little. Ji Yuming's brows flickered, and then the purple thunder Excalibur between heaven and earth broke out again, this time becoming even more violent. The terrifying killing power that covered the sky and sun swept through the void and pressed towards the seemingly small figure. Ye Fusion didn't look up, the strings trembled, and the notes jumped. At the moment when the opponent's attack came, a terrible piano sound bloomed, and an invisible rhythm seemed to be integrated into the prince's will. He cleaved the sword directly and extinguished the thunder. They found that Ye Fusion's temperament was gradually changing, and with that piano sound, he looked like the incarnation of a prince. He looked like a small man before, but now he seemed like an unshakable prince. The storm of piano sounds grew stronger and stronger, gradually covering Ji Yuming's body. Good spiritual wishes. People seemed to feel something. At this moment, the space that Ji Yuming was in seemed to be shrouded in a blooming mental storm. King Mengruo walked out of the pavilion. She is graceful and beautiful. At this moment, her beautiful eyes stared at Ye Fusion's figure. The piano's sound on the other hand is so pure, it's as if nothing can interfere with the rhythm while playing. Harmony, even Ji Yuming's fierce attack. When he touched the piano, it seemed to be integrated with the piano sound. Ji Yuming also seemed to feel a terrible mental storm pierced through the heavens and earth, and the sound of the piano was hidden in it, as if a tremendous power could explode at any moment. Master King Yin is part of the spiritual department, and his mental attacks are very strong. He naturally knew that the longer he continued, the worse he would be. In his body, the will of the mighty prince bloomed, and his body seemed to have become stronger. Donghazong gave him a chance. Won't Ji Yuming win over the prince of the prince? Ye Fusion is the owner of the prince, and those who do not have the prince of the prince will be destroyed even if he is higher than him. At this moment, Ji Yuming's momentum is even more terrifying. In the storm of the law phase, a purple Excalibur blooms, like the prince's thunder sword. The blooming moment, like the light of thunder, came directly to Ye Fusion from an airspace. Extraordinary. Ye Fusion didn't see it, the strings moved, and when the piano storm sounded, the lightning sword that hit him was instantly annihilated. Ji Yuming's face changed again, and the power of the sword was stronger. However, when the sword first appeared, a terrible storm of piano sound came and destroyed it directly. So there was a very strange scene. Ji Yuming's spell was shattered as soon as he was born. What is even more frightening is that Qin Yan is getting more and more excited, rushing into Ji Yuming's Fa phase, destroying everything. Ji Yuming only feels that the Fa phase is about to collapse, and his soul is shaking. Qin Yan entered people's ears. They only felt that Ye Fuxian was not only a prince at this time, but also a celestial son, a young emperor. He sat there, facing the creatures. A beautiful image appeared in their eyes, as if they saw the young emperor standing tall, arrogant to the sky, facing them, making the heart surrender. Ji Yuming felt the strongest artistic conception. In addition to this terrible artistic conception, there is also a piano sound spell attack that destroys all spiritual power. Every time he mustered up mental resistance, he was instantly crushed. Everyone saw that the aura around Ji Yuming's body was getting weaker and weaker, and the magic could no longer be condensed and formed, and even the legal aspects were suppressed and brought together. A muffled buzz came out, and before they knew it, everyone was shocked to find that Ji Yuming, who had been unable to live for a while before, was astonishing and mighty. At this time, he gradually lost his resistance and was eaten a little. Looking at Ye Fuxian again, Qin Yan is still sitting. He sat cross-legged, very calm, without a trace of the waves, as if he was playing a song very quietly, even as if fighting. Qin Yan is still. Fukan's son is like an emperor. Ji Yuming's forehead covered in Qin Yan's will had seeped into his sweat, and he was drenched in sweat. He crazily restrained his arrogant spirit and desire to oppress him. He didn't want to submit, but his spirit was constantly breaking. I just felt like my will was about to crumble. Fail. Everyone blinked. Obviously, Ji Yuming was defeated, and it was a terrible defeat. From start to finish, Ye Fuxian never shot, he just played. But now, Ji Yuming had lost his endurance, his body was shaking, as if struggling, his legs were slightly bent, as if he could fall to the ground at any moment. Sun Qin claimed that Ye Fuxian had never shown any combat effectiveness, but with his performance in the ancient world, how could the combat effectiveness be worse? Dong Hazong wants to try. Ji Yuming shoots, but tries to find out how strong Ye Fuxian is. No one knows, he only shows achievements on the piano. Stop. There was a low roar in Ji Yuming's mouth, and his legs were slightly bent, as if he was kneeling, and his will was too strong, and he was about to crush it. He knew that Ye Fuxian would kill him now. Can do it, however, Ye Fuxian obviously couldn't kill the Dong Hazong disciple, so he wanted to humiliate him in this way. How could Ji Yuming endure such humiliation? I don't understand the rhythm, why should I stop? Ye Fuxian did not stop, he said something softly, and still lowered his head. He was not interested in fighting, and the other party continued to insist. Since then, he will accompany him, but now that he lost, he did not even admit defeat, letting him stop. Stop. Since you want to step on the hut by humiliating him, you must also be prepared to be humiliated. The surrounding people showed an interesting look. At this time, Ye Fuxian claimed that he did not understand the rhythm, but seemed a little embarrassed. Qian Shenmu, the first person in the Dong Hazong melody, blatantly claimed that Ye Fuxian didn't understand the melody. Now Dong Hazongmu disciples are humiliated by Ye Fuxian's phonetics, which is a bit ironic. You are arrogant. There was a figure from Dong Hazong who saw that Ji Yuming was about to be humiliated, and stepped out. He had a strong breath. The sixth order method is Ji Yuming's friend. If Ji Yuming was oppressed and kneeled today in the future, how would Dong Hazong raise his head? His body flashed, the momentum was terrifying, and a golden light bloomed, as if thrown by a golden body, full of immortal power, straight towards Ye Fuxian. Liu Feiyang frowned. It was a challenge, and Ji Yuming didn't shout to admit defeat. Why did Ye Fuxian stop? Others in Dong Hazong came in and shot, and the Dong Hazong people didn't mean to stop him. Everyone around them showed a strange color. What is Dong Hazong looking for himself? Isn't that acceptable now? Okay. I heard a muffled sound coming out, next to Liu Feiyang and Liu Shenyu, stepping out for the rest of their lives, and behind them demon wings appeared, a dark golden light shone on the body, merging into a golden tomahawk, directly descending to the leaves. In front of Fu Tian, he headed for the rushing Dong Hazong disciples. At this moment, that burly body looked like a demon. The Dong Hazong strongman gave a cold drink, his fist broke, he was better at martial arts, his attack power was extraordinary, a terrifying golden punch pierced the void, one punch connected to another, his momentum increased madly, and he crushed everything in front of him. Attack. In the face of the onslaught from the bombardment, there was no evasion for the rest of his life. A wild power erupted from it. His tomahawk slashed straight ahead. There are no martial arts methods, only pure slashes. The action fell in people's eyes, like chopping wood, using the opponent's powerful fist skills as chopping wood. With an axe, the fists were constantly split open, as if broken, unstoppable. The strongman Dong Hazong changed his face slightly. His body was in full bloom, and suddenly the terrifying fist exploded fiercely. Thousands of fists seemed to destroy everything, shattering this void, and blowing up the body that was killed for the rest of his life. The demon-like wings of the rest of life shone with a terrifying light, spinning in the void, and the tomahawk in his hand continued to wave, almost to an incredible degree. There is only the shadow of the axe in the heavens and the earth, which continues to cut the fist. Is he fighting or chopping firewood? Everyone saw a strange look in the rest of the battle. Chai was cut clean, and the remaining axe was cut for the Dong Hazong man. There was a sigh of blood, and the body of the Dong Hazong strong man collapsed, and a bloodstain appeared on his chest, which was almost split into firewood. Chapter 234, Anger. Bang. With a loud bang, his whole body landed, standing firmly in front of Ye Fusion, and the ground seemed to tremble. The demon-like wings flapped, and the golden tomahawk in the hand of the rest of his life had not yet disappeared, looking intently at the people in Dong Hazong opposite. I saw that Dong Hazong was strong one step forward. The blood on the person who fought his whole life was shocking. As if he was slower, the axe cut him in half. However, his remaining realm of life is only the 4th level of the law phase, while the strength of Dong Hazong is the 6th level of the law phase. Who's he? Someone trembled, and then remembered someone. Together with Ye Fusion, in the ancient and ancient world, he once caused the 4 evil figures on the Jingxin stone wall to appear. His name seems to be, for the rest of his life. It is possible to display 4 prince statues in the ancient and ancient world, which can only be achieved by the top evildoers, but for the rest of his life, there is no sense of existence, because there is a fusion leaf, he dims the mirror of the rock mountain wall, and is collected by the heart. As a disciple, he was neglected for the rest of his life. But at this moment, people seem to realize that in addition to Ye Fusion, there is another existence in the thatched hut named Ye Fusion. The young man, who was named for the rest of his life, almost cut down the Dong Hazong 6th order Fawa with chaos. I'm just a mower chopstick. I can't even beat him. Do you have the face to challenge the lawnmower disciples? The rest of his eyes looked wild, and he swept to the other side coldly. If the challenge is not enough, do you want to go together? The people around him were speechless. For the rest of their lives, they claimed to be wooden huts. The arrogant figures of Dong Hazong are not as good as those who chop wood. And the axe before the rest of his life had no rules at all. It was clearly like chopping wood, as if it was like chopping wood, as if the rest of his life was really just chopping firewood in a thatched hut. On the other side of the battlefield, Ji Yuming, who was struggling hard, was very unwilling to resist Ye Fusion's suppression of the piano sound with a strong will, but his spirit was more important than being overwhelmed, and he groaned. He vomited blood and looked pale. He wanted to admit defeat, but his will was crushed as soon as the momentum was released. The emperor's feat of piano sound made him surrender, and he knelt down without shouting words admitting defeat. It is kneeling, although the sound is not loud, people's hearts are shaking. Today, Dong Hazong has lost face. In the 2 wars, the kingdom was higher than the other, one person was cut with an axe, and the other knelt down to surrender. Get up. A voice seemed to interfere with all the piano sounds, shaking directly in Ji Yuming's eardrums, making his body trembling, glanced at the ground, and saw himself kneeling on the ground. Only Ji Yuming felt red. Endless humiliation came. As the character of Tianwizong Tianzhao, at today's piano meeting, he actually kneeled in front of the top forces, which means that from now on, this humiliation can no longer be washed away. Ji Yuming, wherever he goes in the future, other people will think of this kneeling. Dong Hazong's training of him would probably end here. For Dong Hazong, who wanted to be Dongwang Zhuang's first case, their goal was to suppress the academy's thatched hut. How could someone kneeling in front of the academy's students be allowed to represent Dong Hazong? King Yin's storm dispersed and instantly became invisible, and King Ye Fusion's soul disappeared. Qian Shenmu claims that he doesn't understand rhythm, but now, how does he feel? Ye Fusion looked up and looked at the opposite Qian Shenmu. King Yin can be bullied, but what he said before can never be recovered. As the first person of the temperament young generation in Qianshan Mudong wasteland, he made an evaluation of someone who did not understand rhythm, then that person naturally did not understand rhythm, but on the contrary, Ye Fusion crushed him Donghua with rhythm. Zong is a genius character. Qian Shenmu also looked at Ye Fusion. Even at this moment, his eyes still didn't have much of a wave. Qian Shenmu could stay calm, but Ji Yuming couldn't. There was a loud noise, lightning surged, the sword fury howled, the speed was terrible, and it was as fast as lightning. The eyes turned purple, with endless contempt and hatred. In this battle, he would most likely lose everything he had now. Ye Fusion looked up and saw a pair of eyes filled with endless hatred. From those eyes, he seems to be able to read a lot. He also understood what this battle would do to Ji Yuming, but when Ji Yuming stepped out and wanted to step on the hut. When the disciples became famous, did they not have such mental preparation? Boom! With a loud sound, an extremely wild power broke out, and everyone saw Ji Yuming's body rushing into Ye Fusion's body, hitting Ye Fusion's body with the mighty thunder god. At this time, Ye Fusion seemed to be too late to respond, or did not expect Ji Yuming to shoot suddenly. Thunder swept over his body. The thunder sword pierced Ye Fusion's body. The sharp sword seems to accompany the thunder to kill Ye Fusion. At this moment, the hearts of countless people trembled, even the power of watching. Learning combat is one thing. Even if Ji Yuming is insulted, it is not as good as others, but if he really kills his disciples, the problem is serious. Of course, Ji Yuming couldn't kill Ye Fusion. In fact, when he moved, Ye Fusion noticed that when Ji Yuming's attack descended on his body seemed to be no longer flesh and blood, but real Dragon God Monkey Body. He was good at many abilities, but the most basic ability apart from the notion of self-discipline and multi-attribute life and soul, was the physical training practice taught by Emperor Ye King. The practice of physical training was to build a very strong body. How strong is Ye Fusion today? At least, Ji Yuming's attack couldn't shake him. In the eyes of outsiders, a purple lightning flashed over his body. The sharp sword seemed to pierce his body, but at this moment Ji Yuming, who was close to Ye Fusion's body, looked on in horror, as if he couldn't believe it. Apart from hatred, there was a strong fear in his eyes. At this moment, Ye Fusion's eyes were so indifferent, as if indifferent to everything, which made Ji Yuming feel cold all over. At this moment, he really realized that Ye Fusion had never seen him as an opponent. In those eyes in China, there is no such thing as Ji Yuming. His hatred and contempt only came from his self-confidence and overwhelming challenge. He is very strong in attack. When his attack fell directly on Ye Fusion, he couldn't even break Ye Fusion's defense. You can imagine how Ji Yuming felt right now. A chill swept over his body, and Ji Yuming realized what he was doing. He tried to sneak attack to kill a student of the lodge. Even though he might lose that many losses, what would happen to him if he really killed a straw disciple? Thatched hut, can you let it go? Maybe he couldn't wait for the lodge to find him. Ye Fusion's body showed a very strong breath, which enveloped him, and Ji Yuming's body stepped back, but Ye Fusion's body suppressed. Bang! Loud sound, Ji Yuming's body lay down straight down, blood bloomed. Seeing this scene, everyone felt a tremor. Ye Fusion, he was not hurt. Ji Yuming's attack was so strong that he instantly tasted his flesh and blood, but there was no reaction. Ye Fusion, what spell defense ability did he practice? This is sad. He was crushed by Qin Yin, gave up on his knees, and then slipped in. It was useless and ruined. Oh, at this time, the rest of his life was walking forward, his eyes were wild, cold to the extreme, staring at Ji Yuming who fell to the ground. Just now, Ji Yuming's lightning sword was stabbed in Ye Fusion's heart. He wanted to sneak attack and kill Ye Fusion. Even though Ji Yuming failed, his punch was still enough to anger the rest of his life. At this moment, he is like a beast, the wild breath in his body is released randomly, and the people around him can feel the rest of his life at this moment. How terrible is your anger? Immediately, the rest of his life came to Ji Yuming. In his hands, the terrifying golden light engulfed him, and the explosive power seemed to explode in the next moment. What are you doing? Ji Yuming looked up, as if feeling the wildness in the eyes of the rest of his life at this moment. He gave birth to an extremely frightening meaning. What do you want to do with it for the rest of your life? Donghazong people froze, frowned, looked at the rest of their lives, and then someone said coldly, what do you want to do? For the rest of his life, he raised his hand. Proud. Dare you? The Donghazong people roared and roared. If the remaining life force was hit, Ji Yuming's end could be imagined. As if he hadn't heard it, the rest of his fist shattered and hit Ji Yuming's chest. Accompanied by a loud sound, followed by Ji Yuming's scream, and the crisp sound of the bone cracking madly. Chapter 235, A Storm Caused by One Piano Session. Shut up. At this moment, except for the low-voiced Ji and screaming, there was no sound in the surroundings, all staring at the painful figure curled up to the ground. Ji Yuming had absolutely no strength, like being paralyzed, his bones breaking, his veins breaking, and his aura leaking out. Everyone naturally understood how terrifying the blow was. Zhu Wei of Ji Yuming was left by this blow. Ah! A sharp and painful scream seemed to be extremely loud in the silent space. Ji Yuming's eyes had no hatred, only endless sadness and regret. The so-called end was just the end of his aura and genius prospects. Yes, but as long as the foundation of the practice is still there, then he has a chance to wake up. But now, it was completely finished, and cultivation was abolished. Even if some sympathies were exchanged, his life after that was predictable. Sympathy. No, many of the top forces around did not even sympathize with Ji Yuming, glanced lightly, but felt sad for him, and challenged the cottage students to get ready to be harassed. Who could hate a cottage? After being defeated, he sneaked in and tried to kill Ye Fuxian. If he succeeded, he really killed Ye Fuxian. He was afraid that there would only be a dead end. Impulse naturally pays for it. Ji Yuming's behavior seems too stupid. It's just that everyone didn't expect that the rest of his life was so irritable and resolute, and went straight to it, and Ji Yuming was written off without hesitation. In front of the Donghazong people. I saw that at this time, the face of the strong Donghazong was so ugly and ugly, the breath was permeating and it was very cold. Today they wanted to step on the hut, but Ji Yuming fell to the ground first, then was wiped out, and the others were cut with an axe. Where is Donghazong's face? Ji Yuming's sneak attack on Ye Fuxian was wrong, but Ye Fuxian was not injured, but Ji Yuming was abolished, ignoring their existence directly, so arrogant. Thatched hut, did they see Donghazong? King Mengruo's complexion also changed slightly, and it looked a little unsightly. Today, he invites everyone to appreciate the piano. He is the host of this piano festival, and he also represents the Qin dynasty. Ye Fuxian first did not give a vulgar description of the piano meeting, and then the two of them were too much, and where did they place the Qin dynasty? Are you doing this too much? King Mengruo's voice was still very pleasant, but in the amused voice, there was a hint of nonchalance. The rest of his life looked at King Mengruo, and said coldly, shut up. For the rest of her life, if she was so angry with King Meng, it was this woman who had problems. You and Donghazong would like to try their best to meet you. They had to be artful and involve Kotang and Ye Fuxian. That is all. Donghazong couldn't afford to miss 2 sneak attacks, and now King Mengruo is out to blame him. Who couldn't see how powerful the killing force Ji Yuming had struck just now? This is Ye Fuxian's strength, which is quite strong, if it really died in Ji Yuming's sneak attack. This person. Everyone looked at the rest of his life, and his emotions were really upset. Even the little princess King Mengruo's face was not given at all. He just kept quiet. There was no mercy in the dictionary for the rest of his life. 4 words. King Mengruo's eyes flashed a strange color, and no one dared to scold her, not even her big brother who would become a prince loved her. Many people from the Qin dynasty appeared around them, and the people from Donghazong stepped forward. Their bodies were extremely cold, and they spread out for the rest of their lives. Donghazong can't lose. Liu Feiyang frowned when he saw this scene. The problem was Donghazong. After the defeat, he couldn't stand the 2 surprise attacks. Shouldn't he have to pay the price? Now, just go ahead together. Don't throw away my Donghazong disciples, will you? Donghazong people said coldly. Donghazong is the power with the same name as the academy. If this matter is ignored, how will the people of the world think of Donghazong? Zong. Donghazong, afraid of thatched huts. The thatched hut was just a mountain in the academy. Donghazong was afraid of the hut. How did it become the first in the eastern wasteland? Naturally, it was impossible to give up. What do you want? Ye Fuxian stepped forward and said coldly. The rest of his life is a bit irritable, but also because of him, not to mention that Ji Yuming not only wants to kill him, but has already sneaked up to kill him. Is it necessary to let Ji Yuming pass safely back to Donghazong? Since Kotang's disciples are so strong, I have to enlighten me. A frenzy of breath was released from the Donghazong disciples, and the aura of this space was really loud. Several Donghazong disciples stepped forward. The people around the top squad all showed a strange appearance. It was a simple piano concert, but things seemed to be getting worse and worse. If the disciples of Donghazong really shot Ye Fuxian and the rest of his life, there were only 2 people in the hut, and they would have to suffer. Put him down. The Donghazong people stared at the rest of his life coldly, erasing a Donghazong disciple. How could this be? The rest of the life, the chopped log cabin, naturally gave an account. The wood attribute magic rolled towards the body of the living remnant, covering the sky, and the body would be enveloped in an instant. The rest of his life stared at the vines flowing from the void, and the demon wings seemed to bloom again. The aura is a golden giant axe. He stepped on the ground and jumped straight into the air. Tomahawk slashed. The action was extremely fast, the axe shone, and the vines continued to be cut off. Ouch! A loud sound came out, and a huge ancient bell appeared above the void. When the remnants of life split the vine, this enormous ancient bell fell from the sky and was the image of a strong person. Human gravity suppresses the body of the remaining life, and the force swallowed is enough to destroy the remaining life. Feeling the power of this ancient bell for the rest of his life, the prince will erupt, merge into the tomahawk in his hand, and then split into an empty ancient bell. With a loud noise, the ancient species seemed to have a gap, which was shaken back and forth. Almost at the same time, a golden string coiled its way towards the remains of the living. The golden rope coiled into space like a thin snake. The tomahawk in the hands of the rest of the life continues to cut the rope, but the rope is like not forced. When the tomahawk is split, it is immediately taken out, as if soft. For the rest of his life, his body swirled in the air, and the tomahawk turned into an axe shadow, like a real woodcutter, with the rope breaking when touched. There was no chance of appearing. But the rope seems to have no limit, rushing to the body of the remnant of life, covering the sky and the sun, and the endless stream of spells seems to be unbroken. The ancient bell vibrated again and pressed towards the rest of the life. Not only that, there was another spell that attacked the rest of life. The strong Dong Hazong stood proudly around the body and wanted to knock him down. Down below, there were people from Dong Hazong who brought Ji Yu Ming's body back. Good person. Everyone's eyes looked at the rest of the void, and they were able to deal with other Dong Hazong strong people who were higher than the realm. We can see the wild fighting power of the rest of his life, if he really fights with the world, and the Dong Hazong people who face him are afraid that no one will be his opponent. Those who can display the four prince figures on the Jingshan stone wall are amazing people. Ye Fusion's face was so unsightly. Dong Hazong surrounded the rest of his life. Use Ji Yu Ming as an excuse to deal with the rest of his life. Liu Feiyang and Liu Shenyu took a step forward. King Mengruo looked at them, and said weakly, "This matter is the grudge of Dong Hazong in the thatched hut. Will Liu Guo also participate?" Not only King Mengruo, but the French top master that Dong Hazong didn't shoot also glanced at Liu Feiyang. Ye Fusion looked at King Mengruo, his eyes getting colder and colder. Previously, he was displeased with each other just because he was involved. But now, it wasn't just an annoyance. Go and find the 5 brothers. Ye Fusion shouted at Yun Fei. If Dong Hazong wanted to use this as an excuse, he and the rest of his life could not be resolved. There are also many top-level French figures on the battlefield, and even the younger generation of the first temperament. Okay. Liu Feiyang nodded, leaving his body in an instant. He was very clear about who was Kotang's disciple. Since Dong Hazong is going to do this, things are not as simple as a discussion between the younger generation. The people of Dosheng Mountain glanced at each other. There are some connections between the cottages, but the younger generation is here, and no one dares to get involved in this incident so easily. Even the academy did not take any action. The people present at the academy were led by Su Muge and Tang Ye. However, they didn't really look at the hut, and they were very displeased with Ye Fusion. Because of that, the academy that should have started to stand aside. As for the other powers, of course, they will not be taken care of. However, this conflict involved the 3 major powers, the Qin dynasty, Dong Hazong, and the thatched hut. Under such circumstances, who would dare to easily get involved in this storm? After seeing the attack for a long time, another Dong Hazong strongman of the 7th order French phase stepped out and attacked for the rest of his life. Obviously, Dong Hazong had to win the rest of his life. Ye Fusion stepped on his steps and walked towards the void. Suddenly, a terrifying flame appeared on him. A raging fire enveloped his body. At this moment, Ye Fusion seemed to have turned into a devilish hellfire, devouring the fire aura around him. At the same time, behind Ye Fusion, a series of solar phenomena appeared, dazzling. Before that person arrived, there were many fire maple leaves appearing, flying in the wind, dancing with the magic maple leaves, containing a strong will of fire, rolling over to the tightly besieged Dong Hazong for the rest of his life. For a moment, endless maple leaves fluttered in front of the strong Dong Hazong, and they wanted to drown him in the maple leaves. The attacks from the rest of the siege slowed down, and they looked at Ye Fusion with a cold look. Now that they shoot, they study together there. Everyone's eyes looked towards the void. Ye Fusion's fire-like body stood proudly in the air, and stood side by side with the rest of his life. Dong Hazong always wanted to force Ye Fusion to take pictures to see his fighting strength. Now, he could finally see it. Chapter 236, Deteriorating. Qian Shenmu and King Mengruo looked up, and their eyes fell on Ye Fusion. The other people also saw the figure that was burning. The young people who created miracles in this desolate and ancient world were mostly curious about its fighting power, and the younger generation in Eastern desolation. The fire of such a strong will. Feeling the power of fire hidden in the body of fire secretly, Li Daoyun's eyes were cold. In the ancient world, Ye Fusion burned the arm with a fire statue. Fusion's vocal spell is strong, but is his best shooting ability possible? Do it. The strong man Dong Hazong opened his mouth coldly, and many spells bloomed directly, rolling towards Ye Fusion and the rest of his life. But at this moment, the lore of the sun behind Ye Fusion ignited a terrible fire of brilliance, as if the sun's light was shining directly. Many spells were burned directly in the void. What is even more frightening is that in this far phase, ancient characters bloom. Fire, flame, cricket. In the lower strength of Dong Hazong, the eyes of the strong people seemed to have the will of fire, and the ancient words turned into wills. They screamed, closed their eyes in pain, and blood bloomed in the pupils. At the same time, a person's body was burned, and the terrifying ancient figures directly entered them with the help of willpower. A crackling sound came out, and the strong Dong Hazong, who was good at water attributes, released a water spell, covering everyone's body. Ice came, and he wanted to extinguish the fire, but some people were still injured. Everyone's heart trembled weakly. Among the injured strong people, even the strong people of the 6th level of the law realm were there, and even the light of Ye Fusion's law couldn't stand it. Explosion. The fiercer flames were released, and the heavens and the earth seemed to have magma flames turned into a sea of fire, and Ye Fusion's body, bathed in endless flames, seemed to ignite a golden flame. The light of the law phase is also like the flame of a god. This is the phase of the law entered into the Lulan Ancient Ruins Fire Treasure Book. The frozen power between heaven and earth lit up the light of the magic flame, and then the ice power disappeared and turned into a sea of fire. Ye Fusion's body flashed into a residual image. He is good at the will of all princes, and the will of the wind is naturally the same. A Dong Hazong strong man felt threatened, his body collapsed, and then he saw Fa Zhang's light covering his body. The flame seemed to swallow him. Ye Fusion slapped him with his palm, and another person raised his hand to resist with a loud noise. The other party's body retreated, and there was a terrifying flame of light shining on his body. The ancient words of the flame towered, and the body burned. Be careful. The strong man skilled in water attributed it to the power coming to him instantly and sealing his body with water magic. Otherwise, his opponent would be instantly engulfed in flames. In the 6th order method, the strong people who are higher than the 2 realms seem to be very vulnerable to Ye Fusion. Okay. A loud bang saw the giant bell explode towards Ye Fusion. An extremely heavy power oppressed his body, and stepped out for the rest of his life, but seeing the spell rolling towards him, there was another shot at him. Ye Fusion looked at the ancient bell that came from the explosion, and the moon appeared behind him. The sun and moon changed, and the meaning of cold and heat permeated at the same time, turning into a terrible yin and yang vortex. The ancient bell that exploded out from time to time appeared ice and flames from time to time. 2 different wills flowed on the surface of the ancient clock, and ancient characters towered over the ancient clock. The strong man who released the ancient bell method changed his face and felt a terrible breath. He moved a little and wanted to take back the far phase. The light of the sun and moon continues to flow down and fall upon the ancient clock and law. Gradually, the ancient clock stopped freezing, the crackling sound came out, and cracks appeared. No. Dong Hazong's strongman in the 7th level far state exclaimed. His voice just fell. A crackling sound continued to come out. The far state was shattered and collapsed, and the soul and soul integrated into the far state were also united. Destruction. Strong man Dong Hazong screamed, spitting out blood. His face was pale, and his body fell to the sky. Very strong. The people around just felt the vibration. Ye Fusion straddled 3 kingdoms to directly eliminate the Falun Dafa kingdom of the Dong Hazong order. The crushing destruction immediately caused the rest of Dong Hazong to have no time to react and was very decisive. King Wang Sun keenly questioned Ye Fusion's combat effectiveness, and King Mengruo also encouraged him to take a shot. Today, King Mengruo and Dong Hazong have seen it. This is Ye Fusion's fighting power. Dong Hazong's face was so ugly, so many people surrounded him, and even Ye Fusion was immediately annihilated by others, how embarrassing it was. One after another, the strong people stepped forward, and their relatively advanced Dong Hua Zong in the high-level law finally stopped watching, but at the same time was ready to shoot. Seeing this scene for the rest of his life, he placed his hands directly on his back and removed the weapon and axe. The prince's weapon is always on his back. The will of the prince rushed to the magic weapon, the rest of his life screamed furiously, and slashed the strong man killed by Dong Hazong. This axe seems to divide the void into two parts, and the strong Dong Hazong dodges all. Then, his whole body moved, and he rushed forward, like a demon. The tomahawk kept waving, and the strength of each axe was comparable to the strength of the top Frenchman. The will of the prince is integrated into the magical instrument, plus the power of the rest of his life, the power given is conceivable. Ye Fuxian did not see the rest of his life, the rest of his life brought the prince's weapon to him, he had strong confidence in the rest of his life. The sun, moon and France continued to release the power of terror, and attacked several Dong Hazong strongmen who had shot before. The surrounding people stared at the battlefield, their hearts trembled silently. Dong Hazong, even two of the fourth order Faxiang people couldn't win. Thatched huts are still thatched huts. The Qin dynasty and Dong Hazong wanted to break the myth of the thatched hut, but it was difficult. Qian Shenmu raised his eyebrows slightly, and he showed a touch of disappointment, then he took out a bamboo flute and played it with his mouth. The sound of the flute came out, and an invisible thread of spiritual power went straight to Ye Fuxian and the rest of his life. Suddenly, Ye Fuxian only felt a sharp beam of sound that pierced the eardrum directly, disrupting his mental strength directly, and the spell he wanted to release couldn't condense. He frowned, his eyes looked at Qianshan at dusk, his eyes were very cold. Qian Shan Mu Nai is one of the two most evil geniuses in Dong Hazong. He is praised as the first person of the younger generation in Dongwangjuang to pick a shot at this moment. A more violent atmosphere developed from Ye Fuxian, and his mental strength countered the attack of Qianshan's twilight rhythm. He stepped on it without using a spell, but slapped it with one palm, towards the strong Dong Hazong. The huge fingerprint that melted everything shone with ancient words, and hit the other side with a punch. The strong man Dong Hazong screamed, his arm burning. Everyone saw his pupils shrinking slightly. Was this a response to Qian Shenmu's shot? The flute becomes sharp. At this time, Ye Fuxian only felt the appearance of many green snakes, and instantly bit his body. His mental strength felt a tingling paralysis, which was extremely uncomfortable, and his head felt like it was exploding. Strong and powerful spirituality will compete with the rhythm, but the attack of the rhythm is everywhere and cannot be defended. It continued to pierce his ears, and Ye Fuxian's firepower disappeared. At this time, a strong man from Dong Hazong attacked with a powerful explosion, and Ye Fuxian snorted. Although his body was strong, he couldn't help spitting out blood, and his body flew out. Ye Fuxian, he is under physical and mental attack. He roared for the rest of his life, and he was also attacked by the rhythm of the twilight of Qianshan. At this moment, an extremely terrifying light appeared around his body, like a demonic light, and a spiked armor spread across his body. Slowly wrapped around his body, put it on his body, and turned it into a real demon armor, the terrifying demon wings attached to the demon armor, as if it fit in it. Everyone looked at the rest of this moment in shock, his eyes flickering with a faint golden light, like a devil's eye, extremely dazzling. A terrifying airflow rushed towards him. At this moment, the tomahawk prince in his hand seemed to be completely pressed, filled with overwhelming power. Ignoring Qian Shenmu's rhythm, the rest of his life was cut off with an axe. Instantly, the light of a space axe appeared in the space in front of him. In just a moment, the blood bloomed in the void, and several strong men screamed, and their bodies retreated. Someone broke his arm, someone abolished the Fa phase. Everyone trembled at that too. Even with the help of the prince's magic tools, after all, the realm of the rest of his life only has a level 4 law phase, and the extraordinary combat power breaks out. Zong strongman seems to be firewood and easy to chop. Was Ye Fuxian injured because he was injured? Qian Shenmu's eyes were no longer calm in the end. In his state, the Dong Hazong people are still injured by several people. As the unrivaled evil figure of Dong Hazong, he was a little embarrassed. At this time, there were many figures screaming in the distance. The battle here broke out only for a short time, but the effect was quite dangerous. The first people to come were people from the Qin dynasty and Dong Hazong. Today Qin Mengruo and Qian Shenmu were going to meet here, and they were quite worried, so they came at the earliest. However, upon arrival, I found out that this was Qinbi. More than half of the Dong Hazong people were injured. Some people were wiped out and some had their arms broken. Seeing such a scene, one can imagine the anger of Dong Hazong's arrival. his eyes are very cold, and he glanced at the rest of his life holding the prince's weapon in the void, and the tomahawk is still filled with extraordinary brilliance. How dare it spread wild here? Bang! The figure of the prince stepped out, and for a moment, a terrible coercion enveloped the rest of his life. The rest of his life stared at the figure, his eyes still indifferent. The prince was burning with anger at this moment, and raised his palm and slapped it out. That terrifying palm seemed to destroy everything. He roared for the rest of his life and raised his palm to crush. However, how could it stop the real prince? The palm of the hand destroyed everything, annihilated the light of the axe, and suddenly fell, hitting the body of the remnants of life. Only for a moment, the remnants of life were shot directly to the ground. There is no strength to resist. Chapter 237, This Matter is Big. Explosion. With a loud bang, the ruthless body of the rest of his life was beaten by the palm, and the ground exploded directly. You can imagine how terrifying that attack was. Okay. A burst of blood shot out, and everyone saw that the armor in the rest of his life seemed to be broken. The strong man Wang Hojing shot furiously, but imagine how powerful the blow was. The prince has no tension about the far phase. The rest of his life can produce one palm without death, and his defense is already terrible. My entire life. Ye Fusion's body rushed to the rest of his life, and he saw the rest of his life lying on the ground at this moment, climbing hard, and said quietly, "It's okay." The words fell, and he couldn't help coughing up blood and lay down again. He took the prince's palm, and he was lucky not to die. Ye Fusion's body trembled slightly. He shook his hand to support his whole body, raised his head, and stared at the vacant figure of the prince. His eyes were very cold. In the void, the prince looked at Ye Fusion's eyes and couldn't help but feel a strange feeling. From those disciples, he saw the coldness of ignoring everything, which made him feel that if this young man grew up, he would be killed no matter what. The cold killing came out, and he seemed to realize what he had done, and he almost killed a cottage man. However, there is nothing to regret. When I came here to see the people in the hut, crippled, unused, and even the damned disciples dared to be so arrogant. His Dong Hazong is also one of the 3 strongest forces in the eastern wasteland, and the hut is just an academy mountain. The people under his door dare to be furious. Sensing the massacre of the Prince Strongman in the void, all the troops realized that the upheaval of the concert seemed to be great. Dong Hazong's people wiped and seriously injured the digital, but it was actually Dong Hazong who forced the hut to shoot, and the rest of his life in Ye Fusion only retaliated. At this time, Dong Hazong not only surrounded his disciples, but even the princes shot him. With one palm of suppression, he almost shot the rest of his life, and even at this moment he even revealed his intentions. Thatched hut, can we give up? Neither King Mengruo nor Qian Shenmu thought of such a situation. The Qin dynasty and Dong Hazong only want to suppress the hut, and it is best to break the myth of the hut. However, the strength of the lodge's students exceeded everyone's expectations. Dong Hazong was unable to clean up, which had caused the situation now. Boom! A great breath swept away the void, and the prince moved to kill. But at this moment, several figures flashed into Ye Fusion's body, and they were actually Dao Shengshan disciples. One of them stared at the void, and said, "Did you think about it?" The prince turned his eyes, looked at the man indifferently, and said arrogantly, "Are you threatening me?" The younger generation doesn't dare. The disciple bowed and said, "Just, Ye Fusion is a disciple who hasn't started in the hut, and is also my young mentor. My seniors really want to kill him, not to mention the hut, my ancestors are afraid that he will not give up either. Moreover, the reason for today's predecessors must not be known, they must first understand." The prince frowned, saying that he was afraid to speak, but the words were actually a little threatening. Of course, he was not qualified, but the one in Sword Mountain had such qualifications. He was right. If he really killed Ye Fusion, not to mention the hut, the lord of the hut in the sacred mountain sword would not let him go. There are not many Kotang disciples, plus Ye Fusion, so far there are only 8 people. This is different from other schools, therefore, every disciple in Kotang is not a Dong Hazong disciple, the weight is different. Only people like Qian Shenmu could compare to the weight of a cottage student. In the distance, a whistling wind came, and the movement here attracted the elders of the main army. When they saw the situation here all seemed strange, Dong Hazong and thatched hut, conflict broke out. Several more figures came to the side, and the faces of the people present became condensed. Here at the academy, the 5 fans of the hut, Luo Fan, also came. The strong scholar Sichu Wu came to Su Muge and Tang Ye, and Luo Fan came to Ye Fusion and the rest of his life. Behind them, Liu Feiang and Liu Shenyu also came. They had told Luo Fan what was happening here in the simplest of words. Luo Fan and Sichu Wu both saw the remnants of their wounds, and Ye Fuxian was slightly injured. It was not obvious, but the rest of his life was seriously injured and could be seen at a glance. Have you watched it here? Sichu Wu glanced at Sumuge, Tang Ye and the other academy students. The people at the academy looked a little embarrassed. After all, the hut was a thatched hut. After all, it was also a mountain in the academy. There was an outbreak of conflict between the lodge and Dong Hazong. Very embarrassing. What are you doing? On the other hand, Luo Fan saw Ye Fuxian staring coldly at the vacant prince, and he vaguely understood what was happening. Prince Dong Hazong, shot all his life. Your thatched hut student may be too presumptuous. The Void Prince spoke coldly. Luo Fan's eyes were calm, but in that calm, he could feel a terrifying storm rising, as if it was possible at any time of the plague. Take care of them. Luo Fan turned to Sichu Wu Dao. Okay. Sichu Wu nodded, and Luo Fan walked forward. Explosion. The extremely raging flames swept across the vast space in an instant. Just for a moment, everyone present felt a rise in temperature, as if the whole world had become extremely hot in an instant, and the body began to sweat. Everyone saw on Fan's body, there was an imaginary flame of light flowing. It's not like a real flame, but more terrifying than a real flame. The illusory firelight rose upwards. The surrounding space seemed to be integrated with it, and the fire aura was transformed into light from the illusory flames. Burning in the void. Hot. At this time, everyone's feelings are very hot, making people feel a little manic, like being in a fire. At this time, I saw a prince stepping forward, who was from the Qin dynasty, and he said, "Today both sides are injured. Let's stop and discuss it." No discussion. Luo Fan let out a cold voice and tried to fight back. Those disciples beat them, and his skills weren't as good as the others. There was nothing left to say when it came to fighting and losing, but the hut did not lose. But now, it was Prince Dong Hazong who was troubling him. That hut, what was there to talk about? The words fell, and Luo Fan stared at the empty prince. For a moment, an endless stream of imaginary flame air between heaven and earth seemed to erupt at the same time. In a moment, the flame that destroyed everything directly covered the vast space, especially the prince in the void as the center. Make a stove. The prince's body in the void seemed to be burning, and everyone saw a strange situation. An imaginary furnace enveloped the prince in the void, burning his body. This is a prince's spell, and it is very powerful. The prince's face changed greatly, and only felt a ray of fire directly onto his body. A terrible illusory furnace is born from the purest fire in the heavens and earth, and it must be burnt to ashes. A terrible breath was released from the body, trying to extinguish the fire, but the fire spell continued to burn as if it would not extinguish. The gurgling sound came out. The prince's body seemed to be steaming, and his skin seemed to be dry and lifeless, and he showed an extremely painful look. This scene has changed many people's faces. Luo Fan, the 5 disciples in the hut, is he so strong? A crackling sound came, and a stream of water came in, rushed to the meaning of burning, and rolled onto the body of the powerful king. Dong Hazong walked out of several strong men, all released the prince's breath, and looked at Luo Fan below coldly. Luo Fan held the burning stick in his hand, then, the scorched stick instantly turned red, blood red, and shocking. His body rose into the air, and there seemed to be a terrifying firestorm between the heavens and the earth, and the endless fire aura crazily headed towards the burning stick, turning into a long flame and sticking to the burning stick. The long flame of the fire danced, condensed into a more terrifying flame, and turned into a long whip. Seeing the fire whips that are constantly increasing, the surrounding people feel a vibration. Every dragon whip contains the ultimate fire. Luo Fan waved his hand, danced with the flaming stick, and the dragon whip fluttered in the void, and rolled towards the prince of Dong Hazong. The princes look dignified. They are good for the sword to break through the air. There is ice and ice, and there is a ruthless golden palm imprint to destroy everything. But the dragon whip crossed, the frozen space was split open, the sword was broken, and the palm was split in two from the middle. Among the corrupted power, the meaning of fire still remains. The fire whip flew across the sky, covering the entire void. Tampers. A crisp sound came out, and one person was pulled into the body by the dragon whip, and was almost directly cut in half. The wounds on his body seemed to be cut by a sharp sword, and the flames burned the flesh, causing the prince to grieve. Humming. Tamper, pop, pop. A clear voice came out. Several princes were hit, and the prince who had injured the rest of his life showed a horrified expression. He only felt that the endless dragon whip was swooping down on him, and it was hard to resist. You are presumptuous. At this time, a cold voice came out, and a terrible breath bloomed, and a burst of swords shot into the sky behind the prince, and then everyone saw the flames. The dragon whip was cut off, and it turned into endless firepower flying around. An old figure stood proudly holding a sword and looked at Luo Fan. Luo Fan, this is the Qin Palace. This man was a powerful prince of the Qin dynasty. At this time, the more powerful figure of the Prince Dong Hazong also came here, and looked at Luo Fan coldly. At this time, everyone understood that even if Luo Fan's strength was very strong, it was useless. Is that the Qin Palace? Luo Fan glanced at the many princes in the void and said, today, it's a big deal. Chapter 238, Observe the Ceremony. Qin Palace and Dong Hazong were the top two powers. Wang Hoqiang, many Fa, dealing with Ye Fusion and the rest of his life. Thatched huts are not intimidated like this. This is of course good. When the people around Luo Fan heard what they said, they realized that things were really going to get serious. The confrontation between the younger generation was still controllable, but a prince directly crushed the person in the hut, and almost slapped the rest of his life to death. Can swallow this breath. The rivalry between the younger generations developed into a princely rivalry, and in the future, I am afraid that it will be a competition between the two major powers. Many princes in the void looked at Luo Fan and looked at him with a gaze. The old figure said, I am afraid that both sides are guilty. Sit down and I will be the arbiter in the Qin dynasty. How about giving face? Today, no one gives me the face of a thatched hut. Luo Fan sneered and looked at the empty people, pointed his finger at the shooting prince for the rest of his life, and said, only one question, he can't give it up. The old man from the Qin dynasty frowned, Luo Fan, a few eyes are missing. The people at the lodge really have the same personality, everything is empty, too arrogant. I haven't asked you, so many Dong Hazong disciples have been injured. How can this account be calculated? A powerful prince of Dong Hazong stepped out, glanced at the tragic situation of the Dong Hazong disciples, and spoke coldly. Strengthened by a fourth-order method descendant, do you even have the face to settle? Luo Fan laughed. That is indeed the first gate in the eastern wasteland. So fabulous. The voice is a bit loud. The first group of the Fa phase in the eastern wasteland was beaten by two fourth-level Fa phase people, and they are more than embarrassed to spread it. In addition, Dong Hazong's provocation is the main one. I invite you to the Qin dynasty to observe the ceremony. Tomorrow is the day when the prince is enshrined. Kotang really wants to cause trouble at this time. People, but also princely figures. Turns out I'm causing trouble. Luo Fan turned his head with a smile. He knew, there was no point in saying more. For now, let alone the prince of Dong Hazong shooting for the rest of his life, now this is a problem in his cottage. Whether your Qin dynasty and Dong Hazong join my Kotang to control it, I don't care about it, but you have to deceive me. Luo Fan smiled back at the people, and he walked to Ye Fusion and the rest of his life and said, I took the rest of my life back. Since the Qin dynasty invited me to the hut to observe the ceremony, you are here to represent the hut. Okay. Ye Fusion nodded. Luo Fan left with the rest of his life like this, leaving a sentence to let Ye Fusion stay. No one thought about the sudden departure, and he just left Ye Fusion in the Qin dynasty, without worrying about the Qin dynasty and Dong Hazong shooting Ye Fusion. Of course, the heart of the army also knows that the situation has reached such a level that the Qin dynasty and Dong Hazong will never dare to shoot Ye Fusion again. Not to mention the great disciples and 3 disciples are here, although the academy is a bit against the hut, but the real war broke out, the academy is naturally with the hut. What's more, it's rumored that Du from the thatched hut in the eastern wasteland doesn't understand spiritual practice, but is he really not doing it? God knows. I really want to move Ye Fusion, unless the people of the Qin dynasty and Dong Hazong will not leave in the future. Ye Fusion watched Luo Fan leave with the rest of his life, then he turned his eyes, looked at the many princes in the void, and saw Qian Shenmu, the first melody of the ancestors in the eastern wasteland, and King Mengruo. His eyes looked calm and he couldn't even see the hatred, but this calmness made people feel a little scary. Many people looked at them, including the prince figure, then, they saw Ye Fusion turn and leave, towards his palace. Liu Feiyang and Liu Shenyu were behind. Go. Sichu Wu also looked coldly at the empty people and followed Ye Fusion. The people of the sacred mountain sword were also evacuated, and the strong people of the upper powers were left behind here. Even though Luo Fan had already left, they knew that the matter was endless and far from over. Otherwise, Luo Fan would not have left Ye Fusion in the Qin palace. They realized that there might be some waves in the eastern desert. But to a certain degree, no one could predict that yet. However, judging from the situation when the great disciples and 3 disciples of the eastern wasteland descended the mountain at that time, this matter was definitely not small. Of course, like the 2 storms in the past, Donghazong and Qin dynasty are not first-class forces, but the most powerful forces in the eastern wasteland. The hut itself couldn't shake it. The people of all armies left here, and only the Qin dynasty and the Donghazong people were left in this area. At this moment, the atmosphere is a bit depressing. Prince Donghazong looked at the people below and said, "What happened today?" The strong people of the Qin dynasty also wanted to ask, although the 2 powers merged, today was indeed a meeting between the young princess of the Qin dynasty Qin Mengruo and Qian Shenmu, but everything that happened in the Qin conference was not as they had arranged. Something that happened today was out of control. Below, Qin Mengruo's beautiful eyes flashed with a strange look. The cause of today's incident was because of her. It makes no sense to investigate this again. At this time, a figure appeared, and it was Qin Wang's son Qin Li. He looked at the empty prince and said, "The Donghazong people today are very cruel, but they are threatened by the thatched huts. This is not like the first case of Donghazong." Everyone in Donghazong did not feel the light on his face. As Qin Wang soon said, in fact, today Donghazong is worse than the thatched hut. Not to mention the people in the country of Luo, Wang who was injured by Luo Fan. In this case, their momentum seems to be completely suppressed and threatened by Luo Fan. "I want to see, how's the thatched hut?" Donghazong, a prince of the Hu dynasty, spoke coldly, and did not investigate the cause anymore. It was not important. "I believe Donghazong will show the momentum of the first case of Dongwangjuang," Qin Wangsun said with a smile, and then the people on both sides also dispersed. Donghazong nodded, and then left here. Qin Li looked at Qin Mengruo again, and said, "Little aunt, how's Qian Shanmu?" Even though Qin Mengruo was 1 generation older than Qin Li, in reality her age was not much different. Qin Mengruo was a little princess and Qin Liru was the son of Qin Mengruo's older brother Qin Yu. Qin Mengruo's eyes flashed, and she remembered Qian Shenmu's figure. She nodded slowly, "Yes. That will be fine." Qin Li smiled slightly. Qian Shanmu is one of the 2 most powerful evils in Donghazong's talent. Now other people are already top characters in Donghazong. The only person that Donghazong focuses on training is, Qianshan is Twilight. In the future, it will definitely be one top figure in the Eastern Wasteland, and it will not be persecuted. Qin Mengruo nodded lightly. In fact, choosing a priest in his capacity didn't have much of a choice. Only the best figures of various powers. Today, although the Qinvi club is making some waves, Qian Shenmu looks quite good. It suits him. In particular, they both love rhythm and have the same preferences. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. After people of various powers returned to their respective training palaces, a person or monster body emptied and left the Qin palace. The great turmoil in the Qin palace had spread to the 3 strongest powers in the eastern wasteland. This incident must be reported to Zongman. The news spread quickly in the direction of the top forces, but here the Qin dynasty, the day the prince was captured, had arrived. Today, outside the Qin dynasty, under the stairs, there are many people. I don't know how many strong people came to pay tribute. However, except that the main forces in the eastern wasteland are invited to enter the Qin palace, only the first-class troops of the Qin dynasty are qualified to enter the palace to observe the ceremony, and they must also be at the helm of the army. On this day, the Qin palace gate was opened, and a series of strong people entered, along the palace road, step by step towards a palace deep within the palace. Here, many people have arrived. The supreme power sat in the audience on both sides. In the center is a majestic armored army. They are very strong and neatly arranged. The battle was terrible. Come to worship. In front of the hall, there is a throne. Prince Qin Yu has arrived, standing before the princes and nobles under the throne, ready to receive the book. Many eyes are on Qin Yu. This former Tianzhou character has grown into a supreme power in the eastern wasteland, one of the strongest characters in this generation, and the evil spirits of Donghazong and the 3 Straw Cottage disciples are equally common. Today, he will be crowned the prince of the Qin dynasty, and he will take over the Qin dynasty in the future, becoming the most powerful person in the eastern wilderness. All the top teams have arrived and are sitting on the viewing platform. Ye Fusion also arrived. In the academy position, he represented the cottage. As the 8 thatched hut disciples, he was naturally qualified to represent the thatched hut. The strongman Liu Guo and Daosheng Mountain sat beside him to observe the ceremony. People of all powers have different ideas in their hearts at this time. If yesterday's event hadn't happened, today's ceremony was just a pure ceremony and there would be no waves. However, yesterday's storm overshadowed the Qin dynasty prince's canonization. No one knows what will happen to Luo Fan when he returns, and no one knows what the hut will do. But according to the past style of the thatched cottage, it will definitely do something. Dong Hazong was closest to the location in front of him, and close to the Qin dynasty. From that location, he could see the distance of the relationship. Qin Wang son Qin Li and little princess Qin Mengruo naturally arrived, and they all stood behind Qin Yu at the forefront. Qin Mengruo looked at the crowd and looked at the mountains and dusk, then the two looked at each other a little. Yu also smiled back. The eyes immediately parted again, without rudeness, just right. Qin Mengruo looked again at the academy's thatched hut. Mei Mei accidentally fell on Ye Fusion's body, but yesterday Ye Fusion impressed her a little. He saw that Ye Fusion was very calm at this moment, and he sat there very calmly, as if he was really just an ordinary guest who came to observe the ceremony. Chapter 239, Come and Get One Person. The sun shone on the Qin palace, and the divine and majestic ancient palace was full of majesty. At this moment, I saw a figure stepping out of the hall, step by step towards the direction of the throne. Although this figure is a bit old, it is still majestic, wearing a dragon robe, there is a feeling of the world in his eyes. He walked to the throne and glanced at the crowd, many of whom did not dare to look him in the eye. Come on, it's King Qin. King Qin sat on the throne. In an instant, the uniformed armored soldiers and nobles all knelt on one knee, and lowered their heads to look at your majesty. People from all major powers also stood up and bowed slightly to show respect. After all, King Qin was one of the peak existences of the Eastern Wasteland, known as the most powerful person in the Eastern Wasteland. Even if the people of the major main forces saw it, saluting was natural. You're welcome, said the King of Qin, please be free. They raised their heads and looked at the Qin King, and seeing the smile on the Qin King's face, said, You are honored to come from afar. Your Majesty is polite. The strongman Dong Hazong arched a smile. I am honored to be able to witness this prosperity. Haha, I don't want to say much. Qin Wanggong said, State my will. Beside him, a strong man stepped out, holding a book in his hand, and said loudly, The will of the King of Qin, to the world, declares Qin Yu is the prince of the Qin dynasty. His voice expanded, turning into a terrifying sound, ringing through the Qin palace. The Qin dynasty's will, announced to the world, seals Qin Yu as the prince of the Qin dynasty. This voice came directly from the royal palace, and echoed in the vast area outside the royal palace. At the bottom of the stairs, many people looked up and showed bright brilliance. Qin Yu was officially registered as a prince. They understand that this will be a legacy of the times. The future Qin dynasty will belong to Qin Yu. One of the most fascinating genius figures in the Donghang realm has finally come to the forefront of the Qin dynasty and will be one of the characters that can influence the future of Donghang. The armored warriors who had been standing knelt again, and many princes and nobles also knelt on one leg. At this moment, in the Qin palace, there were so many districts, and I don't know how many people were kneeling on the ground, facing the King of Qin. Prince Qin Yu climbed the stairs step by step, picked up the scriptures, stood beside the throne where the King of Qin was, and looked at the people below, attracting a lot of attention and the world worshipped. Congratulations, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. The sound of a uniform sounded, and then the same voice came out in the Qin palace. For a moment, the sacred and majestic Qin palace, which surrounded the heavens and the earth, seemed to tremble at this moment. Even the people outside the palace were showing excitement at this time, only feeling a gush of blood. It took a long time for this noise to come out slowly. In front of the palace hall, the Qin King smiled, but Qin Yu looked calm. Instead, Qin Wang's son Qin Li's eyes flashed a dazzling light, and a proud smile was drawn at the corner of his mouth. From then on, his father would officially enter the historical stage. They will fulfill their ambition. Let the Qin dynasty return to its former glory. Congratulations to the top team, there is a scene developing in the Qin palace. The same was true for the Qin dynasty palace, many people were excited about it. Qin Yu's reputation in the Qin dynasty was very high. He was the top criminal in the Eastern Wasteland when he was young. He has a lot of glorious history. Yu had high hopes. Now that Qin Yu is finally in power, the people of the Qin dynasty are naturally happy for him. At this time, the distant void suddenly heard the Yin dragon. Everyone flashed a strange color in their eyes, stared at the void, and saw a black dragon diving in the sky, heading straight for the Qin palace. Dragon. Everyone's hearts trembled faintly. Someone came by the dragon, and the black dragon's body was so big that a terrible breath seeped out of it. It was just a fleeting glance that made people feel trembling. Devil's King. Who's here? It should be the one who came to Choga. Many people whispered that today the Qing dynasty prince enshrined the prince, and the people who came here naturally came to pay tribute, but if they can come with the dragon, they must be the strongest of the peak forces, and they don't know who they are. See above, there are two of them. Many people looked towards the dragon head, where there were two figures standing quietly. The white-headed man was dressed in white and stood with both hands on his shoulders, his body extremely clean, like a scholar. However, he looks like a scholar, but there is a sense of dysphoria in his eyes, and his temperament is extremely extraordinary. He looked at the Qing palace in front of him, and his deep eyes were emotionless. It seems that the holy place in the eyes of many in the Qing dynasty is just an ordinary space. One step behind this man, there is also a man, and his gaze towards the Qing palace is a little frivolous and equally proud. Seeing such two people, many people showed a touch of color, their eyes were not very respectful. Did they really come to pay tribute? The black dragon swept over their heads, and the dragon's groan sounded through the void. When the black dragon came out of the Qing palace, it stopped and floated in the air. When the guards outside the Qing palace saw this scene, they saw people one after another, their bodies moving towards the black dragon. Who will come? The guard asked. No one cared, neither of the two figures above the black dragon looked at them. This mistake made the guards frown, not because they were ignored, but they only knew the temperament of the people and they knew that they could not mess with they. Characters are naturally qualified to hate them, but the problem is that they are the guards guarding the Qing palace. If the other party ignores them, it means that they are not people who have come to pay tribute. On an occasion like this today, the day the Qing dynasty sees the prince, go straight to the Qing palace. If not for salvation, what else can be done? They do not understand. Naturally, they did not dare to think that someone would dare to make trouble today, not even the highest powers in the eastern wasteland would dare to do so. On top of the black dragon, the white figure standing in front of him emptied his body upwards. He still stood with his hands on his back, looked at the Qing palace, and said loudly, Kotang disciple Jiu Dongyu, come to visit the Qing king. When this voice fell, everyone below all shook, raised their heads, and stared closely at the vacant figure. Kotang's three disciples, Jiu Dongyu. One of the legendary figures in the eastern wasteland was as famous as the prince of the Qing dynasty, Qing Yu. If others dared to call the Qing king directly, everyone would think he was arrogant. But come, he naturally has such qualifications, because he is Jiu Dongyu. This voice echoed through the heavens and earth directly into the palace of the Qing dynasty, just like the voice of a sealed prince, and then came to the place where the Qing dynasty and the strong people held the canonization ceremony. The strong people of the upper powers trembled. The thatched hut is here. Jiu Dong flowed down the mountain. As expected, the lodge would not give up, but they did not expect Jiu Dong to flow so quickly. The people of the Qing dynasty frowned, especially the people of Qing Wangsun and Qing Mengruo who were there that day, and the hut came at such a time, and a word sounded directly in the palace. Don't you know that today is the day when the crown prince is sealed? In other words, Jiu Dongyu knows of course, but he doesn't care at all, and he doesn't give the Qing dynasty a face at all. Many of Dong Hazong's strong faces are not very handsome, of course, Jiu Dongyu is here for what they can't understand. A strange color flashed across the eyes of King who was sitting on the throne. Someone told him what happened yesterday. He didn't expect the hut to actually come, and that was very disrespectful. Please, nephew Jiu Jian. King Wang spoke loudly and landed directly outside King Wang's palace. Jiu Dongyu stepped out and walked straight into the Qing palace. Black Dragon and others did not enter, waiting outside. Soon, Jiu Dongyu came to the place of the ritual ceremony. He walked straight from the crowd and waited for the King in front. He didn't look around, and didn't even look at Dong Hazong's people. Meet King. Jiu Dongyu walked to the throne of the King, nodded and saluted. The scholar looked like courtesy, but the inherent type of arrogance, even in King Wang in front of him, there is still a cover. Why did Jiu Jiani come so late? King Wang laughed. The cottage was invited to witness the ceremony. My 5 younger brothers and sisters came here on purpose. However, in the Qing dynasty, my cottage was beaten. I wonder if your majesty knows about it. Jiu Dongyu said. With eyes glued, Jiu Dongyu was really rude, and upon seeing it, he immediately got into the subject. Listen to them. At this time, it was my Qing dynasty's inadequate hospitality that caused Dong Hazong to go against the lineage of the lodge. Jiyu Shan's nephew forgave me. King Wang responded indifferently. So, does this matter have anything to do with the Qin dynasty? Jiyu Dongyu suddenly asked, sharp words, just like the people. The King looked at Jiyu Dongyu, who was also looking at him. Apart from the King, King Yu also saw the same figure in front of him. Jiyu Dongyu, what do you mean by this? King Yu asked coldly. It's not interesting, but my Kotang disciples were deceived in the Qin dynasty, so naturally I have to ask a question. If it has nothing to do with the Qin dynasty, I will take one today. Your Majesty King will not mind. For King. With this comment, Dong Hazong's face was very embarrassing. Jiyu Dongyu said directly to the King that he would take one person. Who does he want to take? Need to ask. Jiyu Dongyu, does he carry Dong Hazong people in his eyes? All the top tier people were speechless. He came to the Qin dynasty and wanted to take one person. Even the Qin dynasty's face changed slightly. Today, the Qin dynasty seized the prince, but Jiyu Dongyu came to the Qin dynasty to take people. Is this a joke? Jiyu Dongyu naturally wouldn't make jokes, so he didn't have King Wang in his eyes. Chapter 240, Question. The atmosphere in the front of the hall was slightly depressed, and countless eyes were fixed on Jiyu Dongyu. On such an occasion, King Wang asked people to ask, not many people dare to do this in Donghaning, and Jiyu Dongyu is just one of them. The lodge has made a name for itself in the two battles, and it has also emerged as the backbone of the lodge. Everyone knows how proud they are of the lodge. Today, they saw it again. But this time, Jiyu Dongyu faced the Qin dynasty and Dong Hazong. I am here today to visit the Qin dynasty. King Wang looked at Jiyu Dongyu. He didn't respond directly, but he said coldly, his smiling eyes had disappeared, replaced by a faint majesty. Jiyu Dongyu is very impolite, as King, he naturally does not need to be so polite, although the sentence does not say anything, he has already answered. Very direct response. Since the Qin dynasty guests were observing the ceremony, it was impossible for Jiyu Dongyu to take it. Jiyu Dongyu thanked the King, although he was proud as a scholar, he still looked very polite. Turns out the guests are different. Jiyu Dongyu calmly opened his eyes, and everyone noticed the different colors, then understood the meaning of Jiyu Dongyu. The people in the thatched huts are also people who have come to attend the ceremony, they are also visitors, but they are deceived by the princes. At the time of the piano meeting, the people of the Qin dynasty did not stop Dong Hazong from disturbing the hut, but now they stopped him. Obviously, the guests are different. The King frowned, and then saw Jiyu Dongyu said, since this is the case, I will not interfere with King Wangzai's canonization ceremony, and leave. After saying that, Jiyu Dongyu turned around and looked at the audience next to him, saying, brother, let's go. Okay. Ye Fusion stood up, walked to Jiyu Dongyu, and then the two walked away. People's eyes stared at the back of the two, showing a hint of loneliness, but showing their arrogance. Jiyu Dongyu came to visit, although it seems a bit arrogant, but the etiquette is considered wise. It is rude, no matter how strong Jiyu Dongyu is, it is impossible to actually shoot in front of the King. However, what is it? King Wang Sun keenly sneered with a slight sneer. This is the Qin dynasty, not a first-rate power in the eastern wasteland, and it is even stronger than Fuyun Janzong. The hut wants to bring people, then people. Joke. The Donghazong people looked indifferent and felt very annoyed. Jiyu Dongyu's momentum seemed to overwhelm Donghazong, as if their Donghazong was just an ordinary force. He Jing looked at Jiyu Dongyu's back, his eyes were very cold, he was a prince who was seriously injured for the rest of his life that day. Jiyu Dongyu was going to take someone, no doubt it was him. This person is really angry, even when he came to the Qin dynasty to get people when he observed the ritual, he did not return without strength. The viewing ceremony is over and we're leaving. At this point, Sichu Wu from the academy stood up and said to King Wang Gongzhao, then left with the people from the academy. The Qin dynasty wants to suppress the lodge, but also wants to deal with the academy. He naturally understood that no matter how the world saw it, the lodge was part of the academy. It was just that the thatched hut's reputation was so strong that it didn't seem to depend on any power outside the academy. Jiyu Dongyu personally came to ask people, so there was no need to stay in the academy. I will retreat while I wait, said the man from Sword Mountain, arching his hand. The Sword Saint, who was a god in the minds of the Sword Mountain disciples, was the founder of Sword Mountain, and created the supreme power that stood in the eastern wasteland with his own power. Everyone knew how difficult this was, but the Sword Saint had done it. And the god in their heart is the big disciple of the thatched hut. Because for the sacred Sword Mountain, a thatched hut was equivalent to a holy place, and their gods descended from that hut and became famous throughout the world. The other disciples were not clear about them, but Jiu Dongyu was quite familiar with Sword Mountain. Over the years, Jiu Dongyu had gone to Sword Mountain several times and talked to the Sword Saint about drinking. The relationship between the two is clear. When Jiu Dongyu arrived in person, Dosheng Mountain naturally expressed his attitude. King Wang's brows slightly frowned. At this time, Liu Guo's people also rose and retreated. King Wang's majestic eyes were slightly cold. Liu Guo, won't you give me some face? With the release of the three major powers, the atmosphere here is a little strange. However, the King's appearance returned to normal as soon as possible, saying, young people are proud. Seeing today, the grassroots disciples have a decent reputation. King Yu is now a prince. Now people nodded with a smile, but each had their own thoughts, but they didn't leave, there was no need to offend the King here. After a while, I saw someone coming and arching in front of King Wang, Your Majesty. What's that? Wang King glanced humanly. Jiu Dongyu, he's not leaving. The newcomer leaned back, King Wang's eyes flashed, and everyone around him also showed a strange color. Where is she? King Qin asked. From outside the palace, just stand there and look at the palace. The visitor lowered his head and reported that King Wang's son King Li's lip smile disappeared, a little embarrassing. King Yu raised an eyebrow and looked out from the direction of the King's palace, looking very sharp. Was this a provocation against the Qin dynasty? The eyes of everyone in the room were sharp, which was the style of the cottage. After the ceremony, he did, and the purpose of his visit was also to explain that Jiu Dongyu did not interfere with your Qin dynasty prince's canonization ceremony, but he stood outside the Qin dynasty palace and waited. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. At this time, outside the palace, a black dragon was spinning in the air, and behind the black dragon, there were two figures. You are Fusion Night and it is snowing. Two people came to the hut, 3 Jiu Dongyu disciples and 4 Zuai disciples. Luo Fan did not come at this time, and the rest of his life was not bad. Luo Fan stayed in the hut to burn some good things to make up for the rest of his life and recover his injuries. In front of the black dragon, a figure stood calmly in the void, and the peerless Jiu Dongyu in white clothes. Outside the palace, under the stairs, huge figures looked at Jiu Dongyu, and they all showed a strange look. Not long ago, Jiu Dongyu stepped into the Qin dynasty palace. People thought he was going to attend the ceremony, but soon he came out and brought a man out. The man was handsome and extraordinary, very young, only about 18 years old, and everyone vaguely guessed his identity. The descendant of a genius, Ye Fusion, who became famous in the wilderness and was later accepted as a disciple by Kotang. Recently in King City, there have been many rumors about him, especially King's son King Li's words that day which caused a lot of waves. As for what happened in the Qin palace yesterday, outsiders don't know about it, only the top forces in the Qin palace know. But even if I don't know, I am currently looking at the scene in front of me, but I still realize something. The thatched huts don't seem to have come to observe rituals, but rather to pick things up. After that, the academy, Doshan Mountain and Liu Guqiang came out one after another. Dao Shengshan disciples stepped forward and humiliated Jiu Dongyu. I have returned to Dao Shengshan what happened yesterday. I can't do anything until I get an answer. Okay, just look at that. Jiu Dongyu. The man on Sword Mountain nodded and walked to the side. Neither the academy nor Liu Guo left, and stood beside them. The lodge has its own acting style, and the academy doesn't need to intervene prematurely. Even though Prince Liu and the princess had a good relationship with Ye Fusion, such an opportunity was not easy to get involved in, and being able to leave the Qin palace was an attitude. A moment later, a group of strong people stepped out of the Qin palace, and the head was not Qin King, but Qin Yu. Today, Qin Yu is already the prince of the Qin dynasty, and is as famous as Jiu Dongyu. He was naturally the most suitable to deal with this matter, but as Qin King, was not suitable to appear. Dong Hazong people are also behind him, as well as people of all powers, looking at the white figure proudly standing in the sky. From him, it is as if he saw the shadow of the sword master standing in front of Fuyun Janzong Janfeng. Jiu Dongyu, what is your intention to do this? Qin Yu looked up and asked Jiu Dongyu coldly. Jiu Dongyu frowned, asked Qin Yu, what do you mean? The two eyes were opposite, both of them were very sharp, as if they collided. Your Majesty, Qin is here. I have already resigned from the Qin palace. Why are you here? Could it be that the Qin dynasty really participates in events in the Qin palace? Jiu Dongyu asked coldly. In this case, of course, difficult to answer. Could it be said that the Qin dynasty was involved in this matter and admitted that the two powers joined forces to bully the junior characters in the lodge? Don't forget, the Hutt was a guest that Qin Bangcheng had invited to witness the ceremony. If this was admitted, how famous would it be? If you don't participate, will you leave Donghazong? This is outside the palace of the Qin king. Qin Yu did not respond to the question, and said coldly. Joke, my ancestors in the thatched hut were tricked by the prince of Donghazong in the palace of the Qin dynasty, and I didn't see you standing up to say a word to this. According to my fifth master, the people in the Qin palace even prevented him from shooting people in Donghazong. Rumors Jiu Dong became sharper, and said coldly, now I am just waiting outside the Qin palace, but the Qin dynasty must intervene the people who protect Donghazong. Is the prince of Qin giving me a reason? Jiu Dongyu's words fell, and everyone outside trembled. It turns out that a story happened in the Qin palace. Kotang's disciples were tricked by the prince of Donghazong. Today, Jiu Dongyu's thatched hut came to settle the account, but the Qin dynasty guarded Donghazong. The troops looked at Jiu Dongyu. Not only the talent of Kotang disciples was very high, but their words were very sharp and sincere. Jiu Dongyu's words were perfect. After all, it was their fault. In the palace of the Qin dynasty, the princes of Donghazong deceived you and did not interfere in the Qin dynasty. Now that the hut is waiting for the Donghazong people outside the palace, what is the reason you have to intervene? Jiu Dongyu looked at Qin Yu indifferently, and continued, if Prince Qin insists on defending Donghazong, will I understand that Prince Qin did not respond to me earlier and participated in dealing with my disciples who came to witness the ceremony, except for Donghazongji. Besides, the Qin dynasty also has a hand.